Welcome to Wizard Team, a Black magical podcast for Black magical stories.
Hi everyone, it's Bayana, Robyn, and Porshèa embarking on a journey through the many fantasy stories written by and about Black people. And today we're super excited to be joined by Lily Meade, author of the YA speculative thriller The Shadow Sister. Hi Lily, thank you for joining us. Yay. Okay, so I guess first off, let's just very briefly, can you tell us what The Shadow Sister is about?
Okay. This is my favorite and least favorite part of the process. Am I allowed to say the B word on this podcast?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The Shadow Sister is about two sisters who don't really get along. The opening line of the book is, "My sister is a bitch, but that doesn't mean I want her dead." And I love pitching it like that because I feel like that's a really great way to get across how they feel about each other. So not always like the right crowd to say that. But then one of the sisters goes missing, and when she returns from her abduction, she's changed in ways that trauma alone can't explain. So it's kind of a spooky thriller.
I love this. I loved reading that first line, being like, "Oh, okay, I see. This is they're having some issues, and that's fine. We're gonna work it out."
Everybody really loves that first line. When I submitted it, I totally expected my publisher to change it because they had a really big school and library focus, and I was like, probably can't get away with bitch being the fifth word of my novel. But everybody loves it, and it's gotten to a point where I'm like, oh no, how am I supposed to top this?
I feel like everyone's been there.
It definitely has great merch potential too. As someone who doesn't have a sister, but I could see myself wearing a t-shirt or having a tote bag, and then
my mom is a seamstress. We should definitely make that first line. That would be a very attention grabbing merch item. Huh, I'd never thought of that before. Huh.
Speaking of relatable things, or maybe it's not relatable. I'm not going to cast aspersions here. What was your initial inspiration for the story?
It's very funny when I am promoting this book because so much of the really exciting parts of it are spoilers, and so I can't often explain certain elements. Like, the book is actually inspired by a real true crime story, but I can't tell you which true crime story because that will spoil the ending of the book. But I can say that it was 100 years ago, and a girl went missing, and she was found in a place that she shouldn't have been, and there were some kind of iffy details on whether or not this was actually the girl who went missing, but the family so wanted their nightmare to be over that they were willing to look past that. And I thought it was really interesting, this true story that had kind of been twisted by time and folklore, and I wondered what that might look like in the present. But then I thought, who can be suspicious of somebody that something awful has happened to? Because kind of makes you not a great person to be suspicious of somebody who's gone through a trauma. And then I thought, well, but it must not be easy to be a family member of somebody who's gone through a trauma because it's always about them. And then that clicked in my head. It has to be a sibling, because a sibling will have a lot of complicated feelings, and they'll know that they can't really be fully honest about them because they care about their family and they don't want to upset things further.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I feel like I definitely, as a sibling to many siblings, definitely picked up on that, and kind of going off of that, your two characters, Casey and Sutton, their dynamic, their sibling dynamic is very much central to the story. And so how did you approach that relationship, and how it develops, and then were there any things that were particularly difficult about that?
That is like the most common question I get asked is like, do you have a sister? And what does she think of that opening line? I don't actually have any sisters. I have 3 brothers. And I have 3 brothers because my mom also wanted me to have a sister, but eventually she gave up. So that the sibling dynamic and like the deep passion but also like deep hatred sometimes definitely comes from my own sibling relationships.
Let me just say, as someone I have a younger sister and I do have brothers, but the younger sister is one I grew up with. It was very relatable, their dynamic. So good job there without having a sister. And know it, like having like the clashes of like, you have my stuff, and then like all the breakout from there. And I think that comes out a lot in their dynamic. And comes to head with so many different things that they're going through, from like resentment that they have towards each other. And I think that's every sibling dynamic, despite like whatever gender, like the birth order, one of the younger kids thinks the older kid is getting something, and then the older kid thinks the younger kid is. So there's always something going on in that. And
You're good.
I'm sorry, I am all over the place right now.
I have one question. I'm going to skip ahead of you because I didn't write it down, but I got it during this conversation. Was there ever a moment in which one of your brothers was like, wait, was that about me? Or wait a second. Or did they read the book trying to find or pinpoint things about them? Because like my brother does that where, you know, if he listens to the podcast or what that like reads something that I wrote, not that I write very often, but like he'll be like, wait a second, trying to like figure out.
Right.
Is this play about us?
Yeah.
Right.
Am I the bad guy?
You know, like, I think it's very funny, and I can say this because I know that my brothers probably won't listen to this podcast.
No.
And that's not anything against the podcast. It's just that like the day before my launch event at home, I was on book tour. I went to like 6 different cities, and I was only home for 12 hours on one day. Like the day before I was to take a red eye back home for my event, my brothers told my mom they didn't want to drive 45 minutes from Tacoma to Seattle to sit at my event. And she's like, this is like her wedding. You guys need to be there. And they didn't show up. And I've been holding a major grudge about them ever since, and they have not even bought the book. So they definitely have not had
literally
play about us yet. But
so that means you can write whatever you want about them, and
right? It's funny.
But the sequel,
when I was telling
the next book,
right.
there will be.
When I was telling people about this, like on the final days of my book tour, because like I had great audiences, and I was like, you guys are so great, so much more supportive than my own brothers. And they're like, and they were like, that's kind of very, very dangerous to piss off a writer, like because what could I do to them in the next book? And my mom was very angry because she was like, if you read the book, you would understand how cruel you're being. But like, it was very funny having to talk about like overcoming like sibling problems and like a strong
it's such a,
family
like, complicated
like,
yeah, it's such a complicated like relationship, and just like
I would tell mom about this.
The first people that you grow up with them, and like so it's the first people that you like have these like deep relationships with that are like your age, but then they also are annoying and do things where you're just like, well, what was that? Why would you do this? Why would you do this to me? Like, I thought we were cool.
They're your first. They're like your first friends and your first enemies. I just spent
haters
the weekend with my brother.
They're frenemies.
I just spent the whole weekend with my brother, and the
first
first thing that he wrote on social media was like, "I'm so glad to be rid of her." I was like, no, first off, I'm still in the car.
You're not actually
we just got home. You're not rid of me yet. Secondly, like, I can see this. So yeah, siblings.
Yeah. I mean, it's I don't go seeking out negative reviews, but once I saw a couple of the early ones, and it seemed like a common thread was people not understanding why the sisters like were so angry at each other. It was like they said, I don't feel like they had a really valid reason to be that mad.
Why do you need a valid reason to be mad at your sister?
I was like, it's because they're siblings. Like, because as you said, they're like your first friend, they're your first enemy. Like, nobody can piss you off like your sibling, but also you don't want anybody but you to hurt your sibling. Like, one of the titles we were considering for the book was No One Can Hurt You But Me. And so I guess that's like definitely something I deal with my brothers, because they tried to come to a later event to make up for missing my launch event, and they brought like $5 flowers they bought at a grocery store that matched the cover of the other author I was doing an event with. And when they walked over and they're like, you did a good job, here, and I just kind of sidestepped the flowers. They were like, well, all right, we're leaving. It's just like, because obviously it was petty of me not to take the olive branch as it was, but also like siblings, they don't always know how to fix an issue, because my brother apparently went home and told my mom that he thought I did a great job at commanding the audience, that I was really engaged, that he could definitely tell that like he was proud of me, but he didn't say any of that to me because he was pissed at me, and so he just left. And that's basically what Sen and Casey are going through the whole book. They care a lot about the same things, but they are afraid to bring that up to each other, because they are terrified that if they are that vulnerable, they're only going to be met with further cruelty. So instead,
this also was not a question, but it's on my mind because it was like the main contention between the two of them, and it's very central to what you just said about was like them caring about their grandmother. It's not a spoiler that like their grandmother had passed away and left behind a bracelet. And so they're like at tenterhooks about like who should have it and who she promised it to. And this like is like a central like conflict between the two of them. And so it's not surprising when the story opens, she's not sad that her sister is gone, because she's like F her. Like the last thing she did was super awful to me, and I'm not upset that like is she gone, or is she just missing? So as we're writing the story, how much did you have to put into not only the sibling dynamics, but also like as you're talking about like your mom and how she's kind of like getting the like middle person between you and your brothers? How did you feel about also writing the parents and how they are responding to this like volatile situation in their own house, you know?
Right. I have a critique partner who absolutely hates their mom. Every time anybody says that they did not like Madison Curitin, I tell her, and she's like, yes, another member for my fan club. Because I feel like they handle it in different ways. And there is a moment in the book where the mother actually confesses to Casey that for a moment there she worried that Casey might have done something to her sister, and it's an awful thing to admit. And she tries to make it better by saying like, if something had happened to you, I kind of would have suspected her too, which doesn't make it any better, but it is kind of hard. I think it's a lot easier to micromanage and be an in-between between your children when something catastrophic has not happened. I found writing the parents to be really interesting because I feel like every member of the Curitin family is traumatized in a completely different way. Obviously, Casey is struggling with like her own feelings about what happened, but also her anger that she cannot address with her sister. Sutton is all sorts of messed up. Madison, all she wanted was her daughter back, and she gets her daughter back, and her daughter wants nothing to do with her and only wants to hang out with the one person in the house that like she could not stand at any time. And the father, like, he tried really hard to be like the perfect model minority in order to protect his family from pain that he and people he loved had experienced in the past, and it wasn't enough, and he doesn't really know how to handle that. That's one thing I really liked, is that all of these different hurts, how they interacted with each other.
Yeah, I love that. So the Shadow Sister also, like, it tackles the issues of, like, around Black girls who go missing, both at, like, a higher rate and then with less, like, publicity and, like, public concern from than, like, their white counterparts. And so the book spends a lot of time kind of, like, talking about that and showing that. So what made you want to explore that issue, and then how, like, did you kind of approach that?
I don't like to say I'm a true crime buff, because true crime is iffy in its own ways, but I do like watching whenever I go traveling somewhere and I'm in a hotel. The first thing I look up is Forensic Files on the TV. I find that narrator's voice just so soothing. And everybody finds it really funny. They're like, you like hearing about murder to help you fall asleep. And I'm like, well, I have a lot of anxiety and I spend most nights thinking about stressful things anyways. So if I'm hearing about something far worse than what I'm currently going through, that makes my own problems seem less bad. So I know a lot about like media attention and those disparities, because it that's something that I pay a lot of attention to. I've also had my own personal experiences with being treated differently by police as a victim of a crime compared to my own mother. Like, uh, because my mother is white. It's very interesting how people in the exact same circumstances get wildly different responses. And while I was writing the book, the whole Gabby Petito case was going on. So it was impossible not to think about, because not only was her case getting a lot of attention, but it felt like for the first time in a while, like the missing white woman syndrome issue was really being interrogated, like, and addressed, because there are people who went missing around the same time that she did that have not been found to this day. And so that was a very important topic for me to bring a highlight to, and also a topic to address directly within the book, because the only reason that Sutton got more attention was because their white mom basically weaponized her whiteness and the way she knew to manipulate media attention in order to make Sutton seem more important and more perfect in order to get people to care.
Speaking of family and imperfection, the character family history is interwoven in the story, including like the grandmother, the bracelet situation, and then like more stuff with like the father's side and how what that family has gone through connects to the present in really interesting and poignant ways. Why was incorporating Black history as well as like just like the disparity of like Black crime important to being a piece of the story for you?
Isaiah's obsession with history, the fact that he is like a famous like nonfiction historic author, that he's an academic, like I basically put all of the wild and practical dreams that I had, because I didn't even go to college. I knew that getting a degree in something that I was like interested in, like anthropology or something like that, was just not a smart idea for a poor Black girl. So I gave him like the dream career that I would have pursued if money was not an object. Because I love history and I love genealogy, and on my mother's side, which I've talked about in previous articles and maybe even in my author's note, like I can trace my family back to beyond the Mayflower and find like ancestors in every single war that America's had, even on both sides of the Civil War. And on my father's, all I have that's proof of where I came from is that his last name belongs to the plantation that enslaved him. His last name is Cureton, so I reclaimed Cureton for the book. I wanted to reclaim a lot of things, because we are more than what has been taken from us, and the best way to honor the sacrifices that have come before is to constantly move forward. But you can't ignore the past, and it's difficult to escape it.
Yeah, I also like that, like, by continually bringing it to the present, you're making sure that even though the lives of your ancestors were erased to an extent, you're not letting them actually be fully erased. You're making sure that their lives matter into the present, even. So it's really cool that you were able to do that with your story.
I absolutely, I think that's something I'm always going to try to do, is tell stories where actions of the past inform the present, because I feel like that is so natural of real life, but also it just makes for such interesting stories, because you see how like these clues and like the seeds for what eventually happens have been there all along. It's very fun.
Speaking of fun, this story also has like a speculative element to it. Um, what made you want to do that versus just making it like a straightforward thriller? And then like what was the process like of just trying to like weave that through?
I am actually a speculative writer. All of my ideas come from some element of like fantastical. I like to say my writing motto is I write real world issues through an extraordinary lens. So the speculative element of The Shadow Sister was the first thing that came to me. It was the reason I wanted to write the book. And it only seems contemporary until it's not, because that is the point of that reveal. But it was actually very hard because I had to foreshadow and leave all these clues, but I had to do it in a way where you could be going back and forth and you're like, is there something wrong with Sutton, or is Casey just an asshole for thinking of this of her sister? And I think I did a pretty good job. I think it was very hard, but I feel like in a situation like that, it wouldn't always be linear. You would be second guessing yourself, especially if you were suspicious of somebody that something had happened to and they're only being nice to you.
Yeah. Plus, it's like it's not like their world. Like their world is pretty much like ours, so it wouldn't be things that like Casey
A
herself would
possibility.
even consider as like possibilities. Yeah. So I did like I liked the reveal too, just the way it was, because it's like moments where you're like, that's kind of like strange, but
I like to call Casey my favorite dumbass because like she's not a good detective. Sometimes people will be all like, there are moments where you're reading and you're like, oh no, but Casey doesn't notice that, and it's not because like I'm intentionally having her ignore things. It's just her only motivation is to prove her sister is a liar. So she is so narrow-mindedly focused that she's not picking up on clues that the readers are, which I feel makes it fun. I like it when like you know that a character might be in danger before the character does.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, Casey.
Quick,
I love Casey. She's just a dumbass.
She's just like, is this proof? And you're just like, I don't know. I think
I'm quick. It's been a slight minute for me, but in reading it, if you were to like give like classic detective tale archetypes to Sutton and to Casey, like which would you give to either? Like is one of them more Nancy Drew, like or like which one would you trust more, like in a Scooby-Doo situation to get things done? Like where are they at the classic teen detective kind of like front there? Yes.
I love Scooby-Doo. Yeah. But I think Sutton would be a much better detective than Casey. One thing I find interesting is like you see some aspects of Sutton through the chapters I give of her past, but the majority of the book is from Casey's point of view. But when you hear about Sutton both from herself and from what Casey uncovers, Sutton is a sort of investigative sort. She's the type of person to try and gather evidence, to try and find experts, and to try and find a solution. So I feel like she would definitely be more of like a Fred in a Scooby-Doo, or like a Sherlock Holmes type. Casey, I feel, doesn't really crave the spotlight that much. She would probably be more of a Watson type. She's somebody like to bounce ideas off of. The only reason that she takes on this investigative thing is because she's motivated by her own personal stuff. But then once she's convinced herself that she's wrong, she's like, well, I give up now. And the only thing that brings her back into wanting to find out the truth is a big surprise that happens right before the climax. So
I love detective things. I mean, mysteries. I love mysteries in general. And yeah, so I'm just like, I'm like my go-to. I'm like, how did I get here? Like, what started me off in this room? Was it Scooby-Doo? I feel like it had to be Scooby-Doo.
Oh, absolutely. For me, it was definitely Scooby-Doo. Like, I don't want to take us off topic, but I've always loved Scooby-Doo, especially before we had a dog, because Scooby-Doo was like my dog before we got dogs. And I remember every time they would think it would be something spooky, and then at the end it would just be some rich dick. And so it was also like very impressive. But then I watched Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, and that was the first time that the monsters were real, and that like it completely blew their minds and my mind. It like completely reshaped everything for me. I was like, I didn't know monsters could be real, and that sort of reveals something I'm always chasing. So yeah, it was Scooby is definitely a big spark in not only my love for mysteries, but my love for storytelling.
Also, like speculative
takes
work
what
too,
you
right? Because like there's the Zombie Island, and there's also Ghoul School, where like the monsters are like, they're cool, but they're real. Like the mummy is real, and he has a daughter who's a mummy, and like,
and also like and the witch's ghost, where
I love whenever things spin out, but also like whenever like
they trusted
the things
that was pretty cool.
that you think are supposed to be like a regular dynamic for this show, like it's always going to be a real person. Is like, no, this is actually like, sometimes they actually do have fantasy elements, like, so you can get into the fantasy of Scooby-Doo if you want to.
And not to go all the way. I know we
can't Scooby-Doo an hour
on tangents. But
I know I could talk about Scooby-Doo this entire hour, but it's supposed to be about my book.
I'm pretty sure I kind of realized it was like a few months ago, because I think my youngest sister was watching it. Like that, I think, is what sparked my like, I hate zombies. Like they freak me out. I don't like them at all. And I couldn't figure out. I was like, what? Where did I get that from? I'm pretty sure it was Zombie Island. Because I was like,
the zombies are
just so interesting, because the zombies.
And I don't even remember
good.
that. I just remembered being terrified.
The zombies were never trying to hurt them. The zombies.
But the sad thing is that like it's based in the South, so
too.
Some of them. So I've recently rewatched it, and I was like, some of these are Confederate soldiers over here as good guy zombies, and I'm like, oh no, I wish they could have thought about that.
Yeah, see, I only remembered. I have like a handful of things that I watched as a kid, and I only remember being terrified.
And we're practicing voodoo as white folk, and I was like, oh no, problematic.
Which is villainy in and of itself.
Yeah.
So this brings up something for me, is just kind of like, what genre, or what was it growing up and like reading genre, like watching Scooby-Doo or like reading books and stuff, that you were like, this genre or speculative fiction like really speaks to you, and like that's what you want to kind of, or I feel like when you say like, whenever you're thinking of a story, it starts at, like it is a speculative fiction story, you're a speculative fiction writer, like kind of can you think of like where that came from, and growing up, like what was it, if you can articulate it, like what was it about those kinds of stories that really stuck with you and spoke to you?
Well, I remember the first book that I ever read so much that it fell apart was Matilda, and that's another story that's very contemporary, except in the ways that it's not. And it's also a story about a girl who like is empowered by these elements, and then when I was 5, I was introduced to Harry Potter, and obviously that took me off for that entire series. And then I got into YA right around the time where Twilight and like the Hunger Games was starting to boom, and I met so many people during that time when I was really getting my roots started and deciding this is where I wanted to focus. I wanted to be a young adult author, that it just felt natural to be in that world of like huge, big, high concept ideas. I do like reading contemporary books. I love a good romance. And one of my favorite books is The Hate You Give. But like for me personally, when I'm writing a story, because I come from like extreme poverty and like a lot of personal stressors, I cannot engage and like feel motivated to write a story unless the stakes are worse than my own personal stakes. And like, who am I gonna go on a date with to the prom is just not enough for me.
That's very real.
And it's also related to like what you were saying about watching true crime to go to sleep. Like it has to be like your anxiety has to have a meter somewhere. Yeah.
I've currently gotten really into like cozy fantasy and like, you know, like we talked about mysteries. I love cozy mysteries, and that's I kind of inadvertently segued myself into cozy fantasies during this reading challenge that we're in, and I'm totally winning. But one of the things that they talk about with cozy fantasies is the stakes kind of being low and being just easy. Not that there are no stakes, but there are lower stakes. And what I was thinking of it from the terms of like a reader's perspective, where I'm like, now there's aliens, and there's still a pandemic, and there's all of these things. No one can afford a house. Like everything is, even if you are privileged in a way, you're still just in this society surrounded by uncertainty. So I was like, yeah, let's go to a place where there are no stakes. But I do like what you're saying about like how the motivation for you to like write it is to like kind of have that yardstick or measuring stick. And so that's like a very interesting perspective.
Mm-hmm. Especially because writing for me is like working through trauma. And my trauma is pretty big. So like I talk about like how you can't really defeat racism or poverty in real life, but you can make it larger than life, and you can tackle that, and that feels empowering even if it can't solve all of your everyday issues.
Hey y'all, it's Bayana, Robyn, and Porshèa, your hosts of Wizard Team, a Black magical podcast for Black magical stories. Now that we've finished reading one of our favorite middle grade stories, Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston, you may be wondering, what's next? Well, we're excited to announce that the next book we'll be covering on Wizard Team is none other than Legendborn by Tracy Deonn.
We want to be able to discuss all the juicy details with y'all, which means we're going back to being spoiler heavy. That means we'll be taking all we know about the world and story, yes, that means blood marked, as we discuss each chapter. We'll also be discussing in chapter groups rather than a chapter a week. Stay tuned for the full breakdown so you can read along with us.
Finally, we'll be recording weekly again, which means that if you join the Black Nerds Crate Patreon, or as we like to call it, become a BNC baddie, you will be able to watch us record live and have your thoughts included in the episodes. We're excited to cover Legendborn, but don't fear, we still have some fun content planned around the last 2 Amari books and some of our other Black magical favorites. Watch this space and be ready for our first Legendborn episode dropping August 2nd.
Issues.
So what did your writing process look like for this story? And then if you could go back and like give advice to yourself when you first started writing this, would you maybe change in terms of how you approached it?
I think I might have like taken more stock of exactly how I was doing it, because all I know is that it was the simplest book I ever written. And it might be because it's so heavily contemporary, but I'm working on the next book in my contract now, and it is not as simple. And every day that I work on this book, I start to resent Shadow a bit, because I'm like, what was with you? Like, why did you have all of like the ease and everything just flowed so smoothly, and now I'm like pulling teeth this time. Writing, I think Shadow was a book that I was meant to write, which kind of feels like a cop-out, but they're just, I guess what I wouldn't ask myself, but what I would say is what made it easier was that there's so many elements in it of things that I love, of the history elements, of like a mystery, of Is that your dog?
Trying to like mute. Good for the mouse.
No, it's cute.
There is a dog in the book.
A dog.
And he has
There's a
feelings
dog
about
in the
the
book.
Shadow Sister when
A corgi.
she returns.
Yeah. It does. I do think if I do make like a merch item, I should probably also make one that says the dog is completely fine, because like people look at the book and they're like, it's a thriller, and there's like a dog and they're like, oh no, and I'm like, no,
Look at the last girl standing, the final
kill
girl.
everyone before I kill the dog.
The final dog.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved writing Romeo. I think that's maybe that's it.
Here is a book idea
maybe I need to
for
put a pet
the
in there.
writers here, but not me. But a story in which everyone dies but the dog, and the dog stands victorious at the end. That would be my favorite.
Probably
there's no sad
pre-order immediately.
Yeah.
But that would be a very interesting story of like maybe like in a post-apocalyptic society or something, like this dog that has like various different owners, and you follow the stories of the owners through the dog.
Yeah. It's also kind of sad.
Like, that'd be a great anthology idea.
Like, I'm intrigued. I want to know. I want to.
Yeah, because the dog could be like this thorough line of like how certain people met each other, or how like they found the strength to like carry on and stuff.
But at least a couple of stories from the dog's perspective have to be in that anthology, because then at least you'll know how the dog is feeling about the situation.
Well, no, all of them would be from the dog's perspective. It'd just be about different owners that the dog got.
Or Touched by an Angel. There should totally be a touch.
Oh my god, I would love that.
It should totally be like
I would love a Touched by an Angel series that was just about like dog visions of their owners.
Oh my god.
They just show up in your life when you need them.
Speaking of pitching new projects, what is your next project, Lily? If you can talk about it.
I was about to say, I don't know if I am allowed to talk about it, because on my book tour, for my first couple events, my editor was in the audience. Whenever somebody would ask that question, she'd be like, go on. And so I guess I get to say, there is like this running joke that when Taylor Swift released the Folklore album out of nowhere, in like a single day in 2020, that she was leading her fans into the forest to become like woodland fairies. And my next book is about a girl whose favorite musician drops a surprise album that leads people to these locations where they think that there's going to be like fan meetups and maybe the opportunity to meet the artist. But some of the fans, when they get there, they hear a song, and when they follow the song, it leads them to a secret magical boarding school for sirens. And she thinks that this place is like everything she's ever dreamed of. It's going to make her successful. She thinks that it's a perfect like sanctuary. But the longer she stays there, she realizes it's a bit more sinister than that. And she has to decide what she's willing to sacrifice in order to achieve her dreams.
This sounds cool.
A magical
but also
school. I'm like, I was not expecting that. I love that.
No. Yeah, I was unsure if they were going to let me like do a big jump like that. And so originally like the first act was going to be like kind of contemporary, like Shadow. It would like lead up to her discovering the school, and then the rest of the book would be at the school. But they pitched it to the team, and the CEO was like, love this magical boarding school idea, let's start there. And I was like, okay, so I guess I'm not going to do like a slow like guide into there. I'm going straight in, and they better like fantasy.
So is this
but
is this the same story you're having trouble? Like it's like less quick to...
It's less quick because it's obviously a lot more complex and has a lot more world building and all these different elements than Shadow. I do love the story, and I'm very excited about it. It's just Shadow almost entirely takes place at Sutton and Casey's house. It's a very like single story. Like I don't feel like it's a simple story to read, but it wasn't that complicated in terms of plotting or building out. And there also isn't a whole huge cast of characters because the family is so intentionally isolated because they're trying to heal. So there's just a lot more moving parts with this new book. But I'm really excited about it because my worst fear was being like typecast as like a person who just writes contemporary issue books. And so I'm very excited that Sourcebooks is letting me take this like huge leap and really like test my chops.
Yeah. Sounds cool. Looking forward to that.
Very excited.
Also, the sirens are not tied to water, and they are not all musicians.
Ooh.
Some are like actors and speechwriters, and some are storytellers. It's just about like the power of like persuasive voice.
We'll have to read to see.
Yeah. I also like I think I talked about this. Yeah. I don't know if it was on.
Right. You got to be real.
We talk a lot, so I don't know. But like, I do love when you have like an established mythical kind of creature, and then you read a story in which like that's not that like varies from like what you think or know. Like anytime you read a story where like vampires actually can. I mean, I guess it's more common now where vampires can like walk around in the daytime and stuff like that. But like. Or that you can see, these fae can touch iron. We just lied to you about it, or whatever. Like, so I do love that idea of like, oh, there's a whole new, not species, but like mythology, I guess, around irons.
Yeah, I find it fun to like play with those elements. That's something that Sourcebooks really likes about it, that they're like a unique take on sirens. But I also like when you reinvent the lore, you get to like decide why the original lore was the story that was told. And that's another thing I like, being like a marginalized creator. I think we often talk about like how certain dead genres died before like unique different like non-fully Western storytellers got the chance to really test their chops. And it's interesting because like this girl's musician idol is very much like a fictional Taylor Swift, but my main character is a Black woman, and every way that she engages in life and in fandom is through the eyes of a Black woman, which is very interesting in such a like white centric fandom and industry. So it's fun for me and makes it very uncomfortable in a good way.
I'm excited for that. That sounds fun. I think that was our last question.
We could talk more about Scooby-Doo if you like.
Oh my god! Okay, I just want to real quick.
I am very, very like impressed by all three of you by just like knowing Scooby-Doo like that. And now I'm realizing that like, did I watch Scooby-Doo like that? The only one I really remember, and this is because Bayana's little sister that was recently watching them like ran in the room and like reminded me that it existed, was when Tracy was the villain from Insane.
My real quick Scooby-Doo need your verdict question is a pup named Scooby-Doo. Yes or no?
I loved a pup named Scooby-Doo. It was really fun.
Yeah, I like.
What about you?
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, I loved it. I think it was so fun. I think it was. I'm also a fan of like Muppet Babies, like the young and Tiny Toons.
Yeah, I like the Looney Tunes, like just
thing.
Tiny versions of characters you already love. Adorable. Always.
It's always great.
Great.
It's sometimes more beloved than the original sometimes, if depending on like how the stories go.
Yeah. Velma, I hated.
I didn't watch that.
Oh, I previewed the first episode at New York Comic Con, and I wasn't like, I just wasn't taken too far back, but I also was just like, okay, they're trying to make Velma like fresh.
I was really bummed about it because I was initially really excited about it because I think a modern take on Scooby-Doo could be really fun and exciting, and like I think a lot of people would be really into that. And I think that's the reason that it failed, because like Velma treated Scooby-Doo lore like a joke. Like it wasn't respectful of it. And so I'm excited for whoever they pick up to do it. They should pick me.
They should. No, I love Scooby-Doo. It's like definitely, even the like live actions, I used to watch those all the time. Like they're so great.
Yeah. Oh, I love the live action movies. Like it's so interesting. Like people have such vivid feelings. Like some people point to those movies as like an example of the worst types of movies, and I'm like, no, that is perfect
great.
cinema.
Like,
it's amazing.
I feel like I don't know. I guess it depends on what your
no, I'm not talking about like I'm not talking about the ones like on Cartoon Network. I'm talking about the ones. Yeah,
the Freddie Prinze Jr.
Freddie Prinze Jr.
And Matthew, which was
with
his
Buffy.
Yeah,
Lillard.
Michelle Gellar.
Yeah. Matthew Lillard is
Matthew Lillard. Yeah,
Damian Lillard is a basketball player.
Matthew Lillard.
I was like, Lillard.
You're right.
Okay. Yeah, Matthew Lillard.
But also, because I guess this is because it always comes out in also comes up in the live action movies. What is your verdict on Scrappy-Doo?
Okay, so the thing is, I did not realize people hated Scrappy-Doo until I watched the live action movies. Like, I didn't ever have such like a vivid feeling about him until then. So like, I guess I can see it. I don't vividly hate him, but I do kind of enjoy like how much everybody else hates him. It's kind of funny to me.
To me, I felt like it feels like one of those things like what you were saying earlier about how people just like, for me, it felt like a thing that people like to just say like, oh, this took away from the craft behind the story. Like it was an elevated story, and then you put this element in here because you're trying to make it relevant to the children, and now you've lost all the benefits of what it was trying to say.
What's about a talking dog and teenagers that solve mysteries?
And one of them, like Shaggy's perpetually high and like eating everything. Like, are you serious? Please, serious.
I didn't know people hated Scrappy either. I never thought about it. Like
they really do.
As a kid, I was like, whatever. Like you said, it's a dog. Like whatever. Like they're solving mysteries. That's the part.
He just seemed like he was like a younger pup, like and like just you know how younger dogs are like, you know, there's an older dog and he's like they're weathered and they've been through stuff, and then the younger one's like, let's get into stuff, and you're like, chill out.
Do y'all remember what
got things going on here?
Cyberspace? That one freaked me out a little bit too.
Yeah, that was they did a lot of fun ones. I think those were all around the same time. I think they call like that the Scooby-Doo Renaissance, because like starting with Zombie Island, those movies sort of reinvigorated the Scooby fandom, kind of like the way that like The Little Mermaid and those early 90s movies reinvigorated Disney. I'm a huge
that's something that's something I have opinions on.
I'm like the Scooby-Doo Renaissance, and they're like, oh, you're not a normal Scooby-Doo nerd, you're in deep.
like, oh no. Yeah. No, I remember like talking about like Scooby-Doo like as a child to like my mom and like around my aunts and stuff, and they're like, why do you know about Scooby-Doo? Like we watched Scooby-Doo that came out in the 70s. Why are you
It's so funny.
Scooby-Doo?
I once looked through old photos of me like as a child, and I looked through like 500 photos, and you could not find a single photo where I was not either wearing Scooby-Doo merchandise or like surrounded by Scooby-Doo toys. Like they were everywhere. It was like my entire life.
I just remember like I never remember consciously sitting down to watch Scooby-Doo, but I just remember like if it was on, that was immediately what we were watching. Like
yeah. I don't know how I got introduced to it. I just know that it was a core part of my childhood.
It helps that they had really nice intro songs, like the original one, and then Scooby-Doo, a pup named Scooby-Doo one is super cute too. I love that like intro song.
The music in Scooby-Doo and Zombie, I love that. It's terror.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about the new like.
Oh my god,
Spidey and Friends. Where
my little brother.
It's
like,
Patrick Stump, but like
so
I
two,
was
like baby brothers, and the youngest is 2 years old, and that is his. Like you can't go anywhere. He wakes up singing that theme song. He has to wear Spidey socks. He like walks around. You know how they have like the book book
I love him
for like little young readers or whatever.
Yeah.
He's like walking around with it. He's like, he calls it Spidey Amazing, and he's like, I'm talking about all the characters. I got stuff to say. Now I'm singing. It's in everyone's head. Very much.
He's a Spidey super fan.
I had always wondered like what made people
love
Spider-Man above like specifically Spider-Man. Not that I didn't care. I was just like, what is that like so many people love Spider-Man like that? And I realized they get him young. Yeah, but also they get them young. And I was like, oh, so it becomes like a core memory.
Yeah.
It's like, this makes sense.
Well, I don't know, because I
Ben Shapiro voice. They're indoctrinating.
I came into Spider-Man when I was older, because I didn't grow up with any like real like comic fans in my life. Like when I was young enough, like I was never like, you know, your little brother, 2 years old, being like, Spidey amazing. The stories are great, and then he is like the people's hero, and it's like, I think too, the origin story is so like that could totally happen. Like
it's very
how many times have
relatable.
you been bit by a spider, and like and it's like,
as you can see with the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, he's very like Peter. I mean, basically all of the Spideys. Miles is less, like he's gifted, but like Peter is kind of like genius level, like whatever. But he's also just like a really normal kid, and like
he's also a total goofball.
I mean, I have a whole thing about the fact that like they refuse to let, like, I personally think like the best Spidey stories is when he's in like grad school and he's older, and they refuse to let high school Spidey go. But like yeah, it's just like, it's very much I think it's the most relatable origin, or the most like,
that's real.
Yeah, that could happen. You know, like,
yeah, we all can't be cryogenically
every time you get bit by a spider, you're like, exactly. I'm not drinking a heart-shaped herb. I'm not royalty. Parents weren't billionaires.
I think maybe that's part of what's so intriguing about Scooby-Doo too. It's just a group of friends and their dog.
Yeah. And they it's very feasible that, like, I mean, I knew teenagers who had like family vans or whatever, or whatever. Like, you just get a van and you're just roaming around because you have the space and you can figure things out.
Yeah, a van is not a very cool,
very accessible
car, but it made it cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they made it was cool.
Even with like, what I do remember a lot about Scooby-Doo too is like it wasn't like they had like a bunch of fancy gadgets. They were just really walking around with flashlights.
They're just
like,
they're
Velma always lost the
kids.
glasses. She never even got like a chain to keep her glasses on her. Like, she never even got that.
Losing your glasses though is
very relatable. It's very relatable.
Especially this morning. Like I said, my dog was sick, and so we didn't sleep very well. And there was a moment this morning, it's probably like 4 a.m, where I was like, fine, we're going outside. I'll take you for a walk, because like, she was like, the little backyard thing is not happening. And I went back there. And I was like, okay, I understand why you don't want to go back there anymore. And I couldn't find my glasses, and it was 4 a.m. And I just knew that like, I can't go outside without these glasses on. I'm screwed. Yeah. But how do you find your glasses when you don't have your glasses?
Well, in my mom's case, when she can't find her glasses, she will have the Google Home call me and have me look for her glasses.
That's so funny, because I was gonna say, like, you know how you like find my I was like, you can like put, like, they had a sensor. Yeah,
they should make glasses with like a Find My feature.
Yeah,
that would be really smart.
I'm definitely thinking about getting an air tag.
I got some air tags for my luggage before my tour, and it was a very good idea. Like, when you leave your home, and if the item is at home, it won't tell you you've left it behind, because it's like, that's where you live. You meant to leave it behind. But if you're anywhere else, like the moment you're like 15 feet away, it'll be like, hey, you left it behind. And it'll tell
me and my freaking car keys, because that was a $500 mistake this weekend.
And you can use the Find My app to like find it. It will like ping and like a little GPS, like a compass. It's fun.
Yeah,
that's one mystery that the game wouldn't have to solve, is where, like, if they had air tiles or air tags.
Yeah.
I really hope that we can manifest
seriously.
a campaign for you to get that IP in your writing arsenal.
Yeah, that would be very, very cool. Usually they pick more like established authors. It is like on my website, like you go on my bio, like the last line of my bio is that my ultimate career goal is to write a modern YA Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, you just gotta put it out there.
I've put those feelers out there, but you know,
manifestation.
I feel like that's like a 5-10 year type of thing.
All right. Well, thank you, Lily, for joining us. Can you let us know, or let our listeners know, where they can find you and your work?
I am everywhere at Lily Meade, including on Twitter. I will never call it what it has been rebranded to, except on YouTube and TikTok. I am Lily Meade Books there, but you can also just go to lilymeade.com and find me. I'm pretty simple to find, and I'm everywhere. And if you contact me, if you say anything to me, I will be like, hello, it's so nice to meet you. I'm very, very friendly. So don't be afraid.
Oh, awesome.
Can vouch for that. Very friendly.
Awesome. So everyone who's listening, thank you. And thank you, Lily, for joining us again. Join us on Wednesday for our next episode of Wizard Team, when we'll be back to reading Legendborn by Tracy Deonn.
Oh, that's a really good one.
Yes. Wizard Team is a part of the Black Nerds Create Collective. If you want to keep up with our content, you can. Check us out on our website, blacknerdscreate.com. Follow us on Instagram and Tumblr at Wizard Team Pod and at Black Nerds Create.